The road stretched endlessly before Daniel Carter as he drove through the dense Oregon wilderness. Towering trees loomed on either side of the winding dirt path, their thick branches intertwining overhead like skeletal fingers, blocking out most of the daylight. His GPS had lost signal miles ago, and the last town he had passed through was at least 2 hours behind him. Daniel was a freelance journalist specializing in folklore and urban legends. His latest obsession? Bloodwood Village, a place whispered about in hushed tones by the few locals who dared acknowledge its existence. According to stories, Bloodwood was once a thriving settlement in the late 1800s, until the entire population mysteriously vanished. Some claimed the forest itself had swallowed them whole, while others spoke of an ancient entity that watched from the trees, waiting for trespassers. For Daniel, this was the perfect story, an unexplored mystery waiting to be unraveled. And so, against all warnings, he had set out alone. The deeper he ventured, the more unnatural the forest became. The trees were massive, their bark a deep, almost blood-red hue. Their twisted roots clawed out from the earth, resembling veins pulsing beneath the soil. There were no birds, no insects, just an eerie, suffocating silence. Then, he saw it. Through the thick mist that had begun creeping in, the outline of a village emerged. Dozens of wooden cabins stood in eerie stillness, their roofs sagging under years of decay. The windows were broken, doors hanging open as if the residents had fled in a hurry. But there were no signs of life, no footprints, no movement. Daniel parked his truck and stepped out, camera in hand. As he walked into the village, the uneasy silence pressed down on him. He began filming, narrating his observations. The buildings look abandoned for over a century, yet the air feels heavy, as if something is still here. The trees. He paused, frowning at the unnatural way the branches seemed to bend inward, as if watching him. Pushing forward, he approached what seemed to be the village square. At its center stood an ancient well, its stone walls covered in deep, claw-like gouges. His fingers traced over them, a chill running down his spine. What could have made these? A faint whisper drifted through the air. Daniel spun around, camera raised. Nothing. Just the empty village. But the whisper had been real. It had come from the trees. He continued exploring, stepping inside one of the cabins. Dust coated the wooden floor, yet oddly there were no signs of rodents or decay beyond the natural wear of time. A dining table stood in the center of the room, plates still set, chairs slightly pulled back as if the occupants had been in the middle of a meal before vanishing. Then he saw the scratches. They covered the walls, hundreds of them, deep, erratic markings, as if something with claws had desperately tried to escape. His stomach tightened as he focused on the pattern. The scratches weren't random. They were words. Don't look at them. A sudden rustling outside made his breath hitch. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Heart pounding, he rushed to the window. Shadows moved between the trees. Tall, distorted figures with elongated limbs, their movements unnatural, twitching as if their joints bent the wrong way. Daniel ducked down, his pulse hammering. He had been warned about this place. The locals had told him not to come, that the trees watched. Now he understood. They weren't just trees. They were alive. A creaking sound came from behind him. The cabin door had swung open on its own. Or rather, something had opened it. Daniel turned slowly. A shape stood in the doorway. Not quite human, yet not entirely inhuman either. Its face was obscured by shadow, but its eyes, hollow, black pits, stared directly at him. The whisper returned, closer this time. You see us. The thing lurched forward. Daniel bolted, crashing through the back door and sprinting into the woods. The trees seemed to shift around him, their twisted branches reaching for him, guiding him deeper. The shadows followed, closing in. His camera was still running. Through its lens he caught glimpses of them, tall, skeletal beings fused with the trees, their hollow eyes locked onto him, watching, waiting. His legs burned, lungs screaming for air, but he couldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. He had to reach his truck. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the chase ended. Daniel stumbled into a clearing. His truck stood exactly where he had left it, untouched. The village, the whispers, the figures, all gone. He hesitated for only a moment before jumping into the driver's seat and gunning the engine. Gravel flew as he sped away, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. It wasn't until he was miles away that he finally dared to breathe. But something felt off. The silence was too absolute. With trembling hands, he grabbed his camera and played back the footage. The village was there. The scratches, the whispers, all there. But when the camera panned to the trees, nothing. No figures, no shadows, no watchers. Yet Daniel knew what he had seen. And somehow, deep down, he knew the truth. The trees had watched him. And they still were. The road to Black Ridge was one that most people refused to take. Daniel Wright had heard the stories, how the village had once been a thriving mining settlement in the early 1900s before its people disappeared without a trace. No bodies were ever found. No explanations were ever given. The town simply ceased to exist, except for the buildings, which stood abandoned and untouched, waiting for anyone foolish enough to enter. Daniel, a documentary filmmaker obsessed with uncovering forgotten mysteries, had spent months researching Black Ridge. Local records mentioned it briefly, but every attempt to revisit the site ended the same way, with people going missing. The town was rumored to be cursed. Some said an old sickness wiped out its people, while others whispered that something else had taken them. Daniel didn't believe in curses. He believed in evidence, and he intended to find it. Armed with a camera, a flashlight, and his unwavering determination, he set off toward the long-abandoned village. The drive was unnerving. The deeper he ventured, the more unnatural the surroundings became. The trees lining the road were charred black, their skeletal branches twisted as if frozen in agony. No birds, no animals, just the howling wind and the ever-thickening fog. Then, at last, he saw it. Black Ridge stood at the end of the road, a decaying ghost of its former self. Wooden houses sagged under time's weight, their windows gaping like empty eye sockets. The church steeple loomed in the distance, its bell rusted and silent. The streets were covered in an eerie layer of dust as if no one had walked them in centuries. Daniel parked his truck and stepped out. The air was heavy, thick with something unseen yet oppressive. He switched on his camera and began filming. "This is Black Ridge," he murmured, panning across the village. "Abandoned in 1912. No known survivors. No known cause." As he moved deeper into the town, he noticed something strange. There were no signs of struggle. Plates still sat on tables inside the houses. A rusted rocking chair swayed gently on a porch, though there was no wind. It was as if the people had simply vanished in the middle of their daily lives. And then, he saw the markings. Etched into the wooden walls of nearly every house were deep scratches, claw-like and frenzied. But some of them weren't just scratches. They were words. "Don't dig. Don't wake it." Daniel's stomach tightened. This wasn't just an abandoned town. Something had happened here. Something terrible. A noise stopped him cold. A faint scraping sound. He turned toward the source, a small, collapsed building near the town center. The entrance to what appeared to be an old mine shaft gaped open, black and bottomless. That's when he saw the footprints. Fresh footprints, leading out of the mine. He swallowed hard, stepping closer. A rush of cold air seeped from the entrance, carrying with it a sickly metallic scent, like rust or blood. He aimed his camera inside. The darkness swallowed the light whole. Then, a whisper. Faint, distant, impossible. "Help us." Daniel's breath hitched. He wasn't alone. He stepped back, heart pounding. Something moved in the shadows, a figure, hunched and unnatural, crawling toward him with jerky, inhuman motions. His instincts screamed at him to run. He bolted, sprinting toward his truck, but the fog had thickened. The town blurred around him. Every street led back to the mine. No matter where he ran, he found himself standing before that cursed entrance. Then, he felt it. The ground trembled. The village breathed. Something was waking up. The whispers turned into wails, agonized, desperate. "You woke it. You woke it." Daniel turned to run again, but this time the town had changed. The buildings were whole again. Smoke curled from chimneys. Lanterns flickered. Figures moved inside houses, their faces obscured. Blackridge wasn't abandoned anymore. But the people were wrong. They watched him from behind broken windows, their heads twitching, movements unnatural. Their mouths opened in soundless screams. The whispers turned to one voice, deep, guttural, ancient. "Come back to us." Daniel's vision blurred. His body felt heavy, like unseen hands were pulling him down, down, down. His camera clattered to the ground, its screen cracking. The last frame it recorded was Daniel's own face, stretched in terror as hands pulled him into the earth. Days later, authorities found his abandoned truck outside Blackridge. No sign of him, no sign of a struggle. The only thing left was his camera, lying in the dirt, playing static. And underneath the static, buried deep in the audio, a whisper. "You woke it." The road to Ashvale was barely more than a forgotten dirt path, overgrown with thick, gnarled roots that snaked across the ground like veins beneath diseased skin. Owen Reed, a journalist specializing in abandoned places, had been chasing urban legends for years, but none intrigued him more than Ashvale, the silent village. The stories were unsettling. Ashvale had been a small rural settlement in Pennsylvania, thriving until June 17, 1952, when every single resident vanished overnight. Houses remained untouched. Meals sat uneaten on tables. No footprints, no bodies, just an unholy silence that never left. Locals whispered that after dark, the silence grew deeper, unnatural, suffocating, absolute. And then, at exactly 12:01 a.m., the village would speak. Owen didn't believe in curses, but he believed in stories. If there was something to be uncovered here, he wanted to be the one to do it. His truck rumbled through the dense forest, the sky darkening as dusk settled. The deeper he drove, the quieter everything became. No birds, no insects, not even the rustling of leaves in the wind. And then, through the thick mist, Ashvale appeared. It stood perfectly preserved, as if time had simply frozen. The houses were intact but eerily lifeless, their windows gaping like hollow eyes. The town square was still, the fountain in its center long dry. The old clock tower loomed in the distance, its hands frozen at 12:01. Owen parked and stepped out, his breath visible in the sudden chill. He pulled out his camera and began recording. "This is Ashvale," he murmured, panning across the empty streets. Abandoned in 1952. No explanation, no survivors, no signs of struggle. His voice felt too loud in the crushing silence. As he moved deeper into town, unease settled in his bones. The buildings weren't just abandoned, they felt watched. Doors stood ajar as if inviting him in, but he resisted the urge. Instead, he walked toward the town square. That's when he saw the warnings. Words were scrawled in black, uneven handwriting across walls, doors, and even the ground beneath his feet. "Stay quiet. Don't listen. Midnight is near." A chill ran down his spine. This wasn't vandalism. It was desperation. Then, as the last sliver of daylight disappeared beyond the trees, it began. A pressure built in the air, thick and suffocating. The silence grew deeper, unnatural, like the world itself had ceased to exist. Even the sound of his own breathing vanished. Owen turned on his camera's night vision, his pulse hammering. The clock tower's frozen hands loomed ahead. 12 o'clock. Then, the first sound. A whisper. so soft it barely existed, yet somehow, it echoed through the entire village. More whispers followed, rising in a chorus of unseen voices. They weren't speaking to him. They were speaking about him. He spun around, scanning the empty streets. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the buildings, moving in ways they shouldn't. The village was changing. Then, the church bell rang. 12:01 a.m., and Ashvale spoke. A rush of sound exploded around him, agonized screams, desperate cries, the echoes of people long gone. Doors slammed open, windows shattered, the whispers turned into choked sobs, pleading. It took us. We should have stayed quiet. It's awake. Owen staggered back, the ground shifting beneath him. The buildings weren't abandoned anymore. Figures moved inside them, distorted, shadowy silhouettes replaying their last moments. A woman clutched her throat, her mouth open in a silent scream. A man banged against a window, his eyes hollow pits of terror. A child stood in the middle of the street, staring directly at Owen. And then, a new voice, louder, closer, inhuman. You shouldn't be here. A figure emerged from the clock tower, tall, wrong, moving in jerky, unnatural motions. Its face was obscured, shifting like static, but its eyes, voids of endless blackness, locked onto him. Owen bolted. He ran blindly through the twisting streets, the screams growing louder, the whispers clawing at his mind. Every turn led him back to the clock tower. The clock's frozen hands shifted. 12:02. The ground split open beneath him. Owen screamed as hands, too many hands, reached out from the earth, pulling, clawing, dragging him into the dark. The last thing he saw was the figures of Ashvale watching him, their hollow faces twisted in sorrow. And then, silence. Days later, authorities found his truck outside Ashvale. His camera was recovered, still recording. The footage? Nothing but silence. Except, in the final frame, for a single message scrawled across the screen in Owen's own handwriting. Midnight is near.